This is a video version of a thread that attempted to show that the meetings between FINRA and the SEC, beginning in January 2022, had to have been concerning MMTLP. This conclusion can be drawn when you consider that the meetings only began after MMTLP became tradable, after Patricia Casamates, FINRA's Vice President of Market Operations, contacted the SEC seemingly about MMTLP becoming tradable. The complaints from Metamaterials about MMTLP becoming tradable were ignored by FINRA. The fact that the specific group of meeting participants were never before associated with Gary Gensler's meetings with FINRA, the number of meetings and how their timing corresponds to events related to MMTLP, the fact that 3 meeting participants, Stephanie Dumont, Raquel Russell, and Robert W. Cook, appeared in the MMTLP FOIA thread, in addition to Robert Colby, FINRA's Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer, whom was involved in numerous correspondences with NextBridge Hydrocarbons, and the fact that any attempts to FOIA information about the subject matter of these meetings gets denied, it becomes difficult to imagine that MMTLP didn't come up in these meetings. The thread will also be linked below this post on the X platform, but the time between each post, I think, interfered with the flow of the thread. There is also a video that already exists on the subject called MMTLP, the SEC Timeline Part 1. It can be found in the post below if you're watching this on the X platform, or you can search for it on YouTube. This first image shows every meeting between FINRA and the SEC during Gary Gensler's reign, before MMTLP became tradable. The following images show how those meetings appeared on Gensler's calendar. The next post will show what led to the change and whom the meetings with FINRA began to include. In early October 2021, MMTLP began trading on the OTC against the wishes of the issuer. Fraudulent and outdated information was used to get the shares trading. Complaints were made from the issuer, but FINRA chose not to intervene, much like when OSTKO traded on the OTC without the permission from the issuer. Either on or sometime before November 29, 2021, Patricia Casamates, FINRA's Vice President of Market Operations, contacted someone at the SEC concerning the matter. We know this because Sam Dratty, FINRA's Senior Vice President, National Cause and Financial Crimes Detections Programs, Market Investigations Team, referenced this in an email with a redacted SEC contact on November 29, 2021. A little more than a month later, on January 21, 2022, FINRA meetings with the SEC began to include a select assortment of FINRA employees that never before attended, or at least weren't mentioned as in attendance at these meetings. The rest of the video will highlight the rest of the meetings as well as meetings that weren't on Gary Gensler's public calendar. For comparison, this image shows how many meetings only mentioned FINRA CEO Robert W. Cook on Gary Gensler's 2021 calendar. This image shows every meeting that the SEC and FINRA had in 2022 after MMTLP became tradable. All except 2 of these meetings appear on Gensler's public calendar. There could have been more. The 2 meetings that don't appear on Gensler's public calendar were discovered in these memorandums, which provide insight as to the subject matter of the meetings. When you consider that the attendees were mostly the same core group from FINRA, it isn't a stretch to assume that these meetings were related in some way. These are the February and April meetings. The February meeting took place February 17, 2022 at 12 p.m. There were 3 less participants than the January meeting. This is the April 12, 2022 meeting, which doesn't appear on Gensler's calendar. All of the same attendees from January were back, in addition to Ola Persson, FINRA's Senior Vice President Transparency Services. He appears to have worked in many of the same areas as Patricia Casamates. The other listed participants were Cy Rao and Adam Large, whom are members of Gary Gensler's policy staff. May and July 2022. Only Stephanie Dumont was missing from the meeting with Gary Gensler on May 20, 2022. Gensler also had a fireside chat in May at FINRA's annual conference. Then there was the July meeting, which also didn't appear on Gensler's calendar. The subject matter of this meeting likely provides insight into what they were discussing concerning CAT data in their other meetings. In August and November, the meetings continued. The August meeting stands out because it took place while the SEC was still in the processes of reviewing the Next Bridge Hydrocarbons S1. The November 28th meeting stands out because it was at this point that the S1 was already made effective. Somewhere between this meeting and December 2nd, the SEC contacted FINRA's OTC Corporate Actions team. We know this because of this email from Richard Boyle, FINRA's Assistant Director of Fraud out of Washington, D.C. The December 2nd, 2022 message mentions the fact that the SEC was in contact with FINRA's OTC Corporate Actions team concerning MMTLP. Why? And that FINRA's Fraud Investigation Department received several tips and that they wanted to discuss them. Jay Gibbon, a principal investigator at FINRA's Rockville, Maryland office, was copied on the email. December gets a little interesting because on the 22nd, Gary Gensler had a meeting with what looks like multiple people related to FINRA CAT LLC. But one person that stands out, there are others, is Larry O'Leary of MIAX. MIAX's membership list includes a long list of market manipulators, including GTS Securities, the market-making firm headed by Ari Rubenstein that's linked to the earliest and final trades in MMTLP, was fined $10 million for 6 years of market manipulation by the NYSE and NYSE ARCA in 2023, and has been a member of FINRA's Market Surveillance Advisory Group while all of this occurred. Then the very next day, December 23, 2022, Gary Gensler met with a combination of FINRA and FINRA CAT LLC members. This was the first meeting with FINRA, at least on Gensler's public calendar, after the U3 halt of MMTLP. The participants were all high-level FINRA and FINRA CAT LLC staff. The impression this gives is that whatever they discussed, it was privileged information. Now that we know all of the meetings between FINRA and the SEC in 2022, when you go back to the FOIA thread and read the emails, you have a better understanding based on who attended those meetings and who did not. Take the December 5th, 2022 email message from Sam Draddy, for example. Draddy informed the SEC that the matter had reached the attention of multiple departments at FINRA and that he was blue-sheeting both MMTLP and MAT. Draddy wasn't at any of the meetings that took place in 2022. He's likely communicating with someone at the SEC that was either a participant in those meetings or was aware of what was discussed. According to Draddy, he was investigating the issuers from a fraud manipulation angle and that he was seeking to compare notes with the SEC in order to streamline their investigations. Subsequent emails indicate that they did conduct a Zoom meeting. Then, on December 6, 2022, FINRA posted the first MMTLP corporate action to their daily list. There was a problem, though. The corporate action included an incorrect December 13th share cancellation date, and the overall effective date of the corporate action matched that incorrect December 13th date at the 0 hour. There are 3 reasons this corporate action was in violation of FINRA's Rule 6490. 1. Because the blue sheet investigation initiated the day prior by Sam Draddy couldn't have been completed. This was an investigation into 2 trading symbols. Hundreds of brokers would have needed to have been contacted. According to FINRA, this was a burdensome undertaking. 2. There was also the issue of a pending case from the SEC that would later result in a Wells notice and then charges against former CEOs John Burda and George Palikaras. 3. Rule 6490 requires FINRA to make sure there are no issues related to settlement and clearance before posting an issuer's corporate action to their daily list. FINRA posted 2 MMTLP corporate actions. Both times they neglected to account for the built-in issue that they created by including a 0-hour December 13th date that was never requested by the issuer. On December 9, 2022, FINRA pretended to discover an issue related to settlement and clearance, and they U3 halted MMTLP. If they weren't pretending to discover this issue, they'd be admitting that they failed to ensure there were no issues related to settlement and clearance, which was their obligation according to their Rule 6490. Then, on Sunday, December 11, 2022, there were emails from FINRA CEO Robert W. Cook, presumably to Gary Gensler, claiming that due to threats received related to FINRA's U3 halt of MMTLP, FINRA was instructing their employees to stay home for the week. Later that same Sunday evening, Stephanie Dumont, FINRA's Executive Vice President, Market Regulation and Transparency Services, emailed a redacted contact at the SEC. In the message, she asks if the person would have time on Monday to discuss what's been happening with MMTLP and the recent trading halt. She clearly indicates something has been occurring in MMTLP after the halt, and the fact that the message was sent on Sunday night gives the impression she had the ability to monitor the situation from home. Raquel Russell was copied on the email, and it has been Robert W. Cook, Stephanie Dumont, and Raquel Russell, all names that appeared in the FOIA emails, were also within the group of FINRA employees that met with the SEC multiple times in 2022, beginning in January. From the newest granted FOIA, we learn that the SEC staff participants in the December 23, 2022 meeting with FINRA were Amanda Fisher, Hao-Xiang Zhu, and Sai Rao. Sai Rao has been a member of Gary Gensler's Trading and Markets Policy Council since 2021, and this is at least one of the people that the group from FINRA met with in the April and July 2022 meetings that didn't appear on Gensler's public calendar. You'll also notice in this image that the meeting topic is redacted, but obviously it's concerning MMTLP because the redaction is due to the subject matter being under investigation. And if this same core group has been meeting for an entire year, beginning only after MMTLP became tradable, after Metamaterials complained to FINRA about it becoming tradable, and after Patricia Casamates contacted the SEC, and all of the other emails linked to attendees, as well as Robert Colby, FINRA's head of legal counsel that corresponded with NextBridge Hydrocarbons. It shouldn't be considered a reach if it looks like the SEC and FINRA have been meeting about MMTLP for nearly a year before the U3 halt. Also, the SEC reaching out to FINRA's OTC Corporate Actions team on or before December 2nd, 2022 really seems like they were giving them instructions to commit fraud, in my opinion.